Your college football game day has come early.
Goes down the field for Sicky, goes up high. He's got get away from the top speed, and the ball is free. Woo! What a hit! You got barbecue back there.
From underdog triumphs to powerhouse showdowns, we've got your winning playbook covered. It's BetQLU with Chris Mack, RJ Choppy, and John Martin, presented by BetMGM, the sports book born in Vegas. Download the app today. Please gamble responsibly.
And I don't know how it happened, but we're here. We've arrived at Conference Championship weekend after an absolutely bananas, BANANAS rivalry weekend, which we'll go over in just a moment. Welcome in to BetQLU alongside RJ Choppy and John Martin. I'm Chris Mack. We are live coast to coast on the BetQL network, wherever you may be in the world, right there with you inside your Odyssey app every Friday night and Saturday morning. AUDACY. It's free. Download it today. And of course, you can get us in podcast form there as well, or wherever you get your podcast. Just search BetQLU. You can even watch the show on YouTube. Just search for the Odyssey Sports Channel, and we are there getting you ready for this massive conference championship weekend when it feels like there could be one or two teams left to play spoiler and maybe something to talk about the teams that could get spoiled if those spoilers come to play on conference championship weekend. We'll get into it in just a moment here. Update you on the CFP rankings. You know what they are, but look a little bit closer at the picture and where we think it goes from here. Get you our best bets as well before we wrap up. But let's start with last weekend, gentlemen. Michigan upsets Ohio State. I'm not laughing. You're laughing, Ryan Day. 20.5-point underdog. I'll be honest, I didn't bet it because I didn't see that happening. I thought maybe it'd be a little uncomfortably close for Ohio State. I didn't see that happening. 9-1 on the money line. Georgia outlasts Georgia Tech in an 8-overtime thriller. Syracuse upsets Miami to spoil the Canes' playoff chances. South Carolina beats Clemson in the Palmetto State rivalry, outscoring them 10-0 in the fourth quarter. Now Clemson hanging on by a thread. They still got in to the ACC championship game because of that Miami loss. Where do we start, John? I think we all at least initially thought, okay, we'll start with Ohio State because Ryan Day has to win at least a playoff game now, right, in order to hold on to things in Columbus. But I think really the bigger story is the Miami loss because we saw Tuesday night it gets them bounced from the playoff.
Yeah, and also, Clemson losing too, right? I mean, it's both of those things. So if Clemson beats South Carolina, they're probably, still ahead of Alabama at this moment with the big ACC championship left to play. But yeah, it was the combination of Miami losing and then Clemson, crapping the bed as well there on an egregious interception. And I'm very nervous. I'm very nervous about what this weekend may represent and the message that it may send. And I'm sure that they're feeling the same feelings in the ACC offices today as well, because it definitely feels like this is setting up to have two loss ACC teams be left out if Clemson wins, right? If Clemson pulls this off, and I saw some steam come in on Clemson today, that if SMU loses this game, it definitely feels like they are going to find a way to move SMU out and Alabama in. And, that feels like a decision that will send shockwaves through college football, shockwaves through the college football playoff. SMU wins, Alabama's out. Right. I feel like that's probably the only outcome where that's actually in doubt in terms of, okay, if this happens, Bama's in, Bama's out. I don't think there are any other hypotheticals on the board, but it definitely feels like if you're an ACC executive today, you're biting your fingernails and probably just praying that SMU wins to remove all doubt.
Yeah, because, if SMU wins, Bama's going to be in and everything will be right. Everything will be straight. There won't be any controversy over that. You're going to get your one team in and not. I think that you got to prepare yourself for if Clemson wins, that SMU doesn't make it. This is the reality of it. You just got to prepare yourself. And I don't know how I feel about it. I think I can't Look, I can absolutely, and I absolutely think that the argument that Miami should be that Alabama being ahead of Miami, I think that's the right call. Miami hadn't beaten anybody all year.
Yeah.
SMU has a win over Louisville and Pitt, and they were ranked at the time, but they're not ranked now. And at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? And that's what the committee looks at. And Bama, Bama for all their warts, and SMU doesn't have a bad loss, but and Bama does. That loss to Oklahoma's bad, but they've got great wins. The committee in these sport, in both basketball and this, they've shown they value good wins over the detriment of bad losses. So I'm just prepared for Alabama to get in if SMU loses.
Yeah, SMU minus 430 at BetMGM to make the playoffs still. 3-1 to miss. I think if SMU loses a tight game to Clemson, they're staying in. And I think Clemson will be the team that effectively bounces Alabama then out of the picture. I think, look, if in some far-off land there's a scenario where Clemson blows SMU out, maybe then we're only talking about Clemson being the lone ACC team. I just have a hard time seeing an SMU team, and maybe I'm being naive, but even looking at the numbers of the books right now tells me that everyone else is thinking, all right, SMU loses a close game, we got 2 ACC teams in, and Bama gets bounced. And I think that would make sense. And I also think, like you said, Choppy, Miami getting bounced after the loss to Syracuse, after some of the tight, ugly wins that they had early in the year, after some of the terrible losses they'd had, after some of the terrible games, I should say, they had in the last couple of weeks, including an ugly loss, that it makes sense for Miami to get bounced. I think this sets up for it basically telling Clemson and Dabo, you got the chance to bounce Bama, boys. Not only that, but get a first-round bye in the process, too. I think that's how it sets up this weekend. That's the way I would look at it right now with Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee, and Indiana all feeling like locks. Feel like those 8 spots are locks, plus the Mountain West champ, probably Boise, but you never know with UNLV. And again, for those of you hearing this, or watching it on Saturday morning, that has already been decided. But, basically 10 spots locked up, right? With the Mountain West and Big 12 champs included there, John. And then it's a matter of how do the two, if you get 2 ACC spots, shake out, or is it the ACC champ and Bama?
Yeah, I think the one hesitation I would have about SMU is all these ACC resumes, right, basically look the same when you're talking about the top. You're talking about the top, Miami and SMU's resumes basically look the same, other than the fact that SMU went undefeated in their league and Miami obviously did not. But what would worry me is that the precedent has already been set by this committee when Georgia lost to Ole Miss on the road. Georgia dropped 9 spots. They dropped 9 spots for losing to an Ole Miss team that, honestly, I can make the argument Ole Miss is more deserving than Alabama. I can make that. I mean, their win over Georgia was far more convincing, far more dominant, and they didn't lose a game the way that Bama lost to Oklahoma. I don't think Alabama is a team that deserves to be in when they go on the road to a middling Norman, Oklahoma Sooners football team and get handled the way they did and Milroe look as bad as he did. To me, that is not a playoff team. That's my opinion. I don't think the committee will share that view, though. I think they will penalize SMU if they lose this game. That's basically a road game, and they'll get this this fourth SEC team in, 4th or 5th, and I think it creates this entire new set of drama. That okay, SMU, and Rhett Lashley made this point, if everybody came down with what I have, this variant of COVID that I have been dealing with for 2 weeks, and they said we're not playing in this conference championship game, they're in no matter what. But because they play the game and because they lost, they're going to get docked for that, and Alabama's going to be in. So I think it could create a nasty precedent moving forward if that's what happens.
I'll tell you this, because like Georgia dropped 9 spots. Ohio State dropped just 4, and they lost to an awful team. at home, and they only lost 4. They only dropped 4 spots, and that doesn't make sense. Indiana dropped more spots by losing to Ohio State than Ohio State dropped by losing at home to Michigan. And I could easily say that. And Ohio State should have dropped more than they did. They didn't drop. They only dropped 4 spots. And I'll say this. I mean, I know that Alabama's loss at Oklahoma is awful. Mm-hmm. That Kentucky loss that Ole Miss had, that's probably the worst loss in the country. Kentucky's a terrible team. Terrible. And they lost at home to them. I totally see the SMU side. And if I was SMU and that Rhett Lashley comment about just coming down with that COVID strain, I mean, he's not wrong, because Ward Manuel talked about all these other teams. He talked about he talked about Indiana and Ohio State and Alabama. All you see, they have no more data points, right? Nothing else. Well,
right.
That would mean SMU has no more, and they are where they are, and you've said that they're the number 8 team. So that might be.
They would be where Tennessee is. They would be where Tennessee is parked at this weekend. It doesn't matter. We're done. We're in. We don't have to worry about it.
Exactly.
I would rather be that than have to go out here against the Clemson team that I don't think is very good, relatively speaking, but certainly good enough to win an ACC game like this one.
The precedent that's going to be set if SMU loses a decent ball game to Clemson, like you said, John, effectively a road game, right? But if SMU loses a tight ball game to Clemson and gets bounced for Alabama, the precedent that's going to be set is that you can be the 3rd or 4th team in the Big Ten or SEC, and you effectively have an auto bid. And can lose a conference championship game as a 1-loss team going in the ACC or the Big 12, and it doesn't mean a damn thing. You got to win your conference championship.
Those are power leagues.
Not anymore. That's what they're telling you. That's what they're telling you. They are second tier. There are the 2 big boys. There are the 2 mega conferences. There's Hogan and Savage, and then there's everybody else, boys. And if you can't strike the pose, then guess what? You're not the SEC or the Big Ten. Sorry, you got to win your conference championship. It does set
horizon. They're the horizon.
The group of 5. It's like the group. It's like no different than the Mountain West right now.
Seriously, that's what it comes down to. That's the way it's going to shake out if SMU loses and gets bounced for Bama. If SMU wins, then we can hold on to this sort of ideal that we have that, you can win the ACC or the Big 12 and maybe be held on some sort of level playing field with the 2 big boys, even though we know you won't be. You'll get a bye, but nobody's going to look at you as equally as they look at even the 3rd or 4th team in the SEC. Prospective matchups right now, and they won't be the same a week from now, but prospective matchups would be Penn State hosting Big 12 champ Arizona State, 13.5-point prospective spread on that. Ohio State hosting Tennessee in Columbus, a 6-point spread. Notre Dame hosting Alabama and handing the Tide a field goal. And Georgia hosting the Hoosiers and handing them 8.5. That was the first spread that jumped out to us on our group chat this week, John, when those prospective spreads came out Tuesday night. The Bulldogs laying just 8.5 at home to an Indiana team that got boat raced by Ohio State and Columbus as 10-point dogs, right?
Yeah, it would be my biggest bet of the season by a wide margin.
Yeah.
I mean, just because I'm using the transitive property here, right? Like, I mean, Ohio State got out to what? 12.5, right? At some points before that number came back down. And you're telling me that Georgia is 4 points worse than Ohio State? I don't believe that for a single solitary second. And then, by the way, if we're just going to be results oriented, Indiana got their ass handed to them. So, there's just really nothing that would keep me away from this number. And I suspect that if this number was opened at 8.5, it would quickly become 10.5, quickly become 12.5. And before you guys could blink, it'd probably be sitting there at 14.
And if you look at it, of at least 2 other games, if Alabama's hosting Notre Dame's not a 3-point favorite. Alabama's a 3-point favorite. And if Tennessee's hosting Ohio State, it's probably a pick 'em. If Georgia's on the road at Indiana, Georgia's still a favorite of at least 5. Right? They're not. They're not flipping the who's favored. It is the most lopsided of the bets. I would be petrified of how to bet the Penn State Arizona State game. Because we just haven't seen, we haven't seen Penn State. I mean, Penn State would be playing a good team, and Penn State's better, but we haven't seen Arizona State play this type of game this year lately, right? Where they have to go into that environment.
No, but if there's an equalizer, it's having a run game, I think, that Arizona State has with Scadaboo. And we've seen Penn State struggle at times late in games against, granted, it was Ohio State, it was a much better team, but against run games when a team is looking to explicitly do that, run against them. Say, hey, we're going to run on you now, and Penn State not be able to stop them. Those 5 through 8 seeds are going to be fascinating to see how they shake out next week as well. We'll talk about these conference championship games. We got them to preview for you next. We will start with that Arizona State team going up against Iowa State in Jerry World Saturday afternoon, noon Eastern, 11 Central, kick in the Big 12 championship game. And we'll talk SEC, we'll talk ACC, we'll talk Big Ten, all on the way here on BetQLU.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, pick it in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, put Pickett in.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
Live coast to coast on the BetQL network, it is BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. The sportsbook born in Vegas, getting you ready for conference championship games. We'll get started with the Mountain West. Arizona State's involved, Iowa State's involved. All of a sudden, I go Mountain West. The Big 12 in just a second here on BetQLU. Alongside RJ Choppy, I'm Chris Mack. John Martin stepped out. He'll be back with undoubtedly some kind of ridiculous collabo bet next week after we get through the conference championship games and have the 12-team bracket set up. We'll also talk SEC, ACC, and Big X championship games in just a moment here before we get you set up with our best bets headed out the door. Don't forget, you can get us in podcast form in there, right in there inside your Odyssey app, AUDACY, or just listen to us live every Friday night and Saturday morning as we get you ready for these games. Let's start with the Big 12 championship game, Choppy. 12 Eastern, 11 Central on ABC on Saturday, live from Jerry World. Number 16 Iowa State Cyclones against number 15 Arizona State Sun Devils. Arizona State, 2-point favorites here. Total sitting right around 49.5. Arizona State's offense has been dynamic this year. A lot of that has been Cam Scatterbo, who's right around 1,400 yards on the ground, 19 total touchdowns in just 11 games, over 5 yards a carry. Rocco Becht, though, behind that veteran offensive line, has been pretty well protected, only been sacked 15 times. And passing-wise, the Cyclones can open it up when they want to. 32nd in the country in EPA per pass. So where do we go with this one? Jordan Tyson could be out for Arizona State. Shoulder injury last week against the Wildcats in that emphatic victory. Iowa State, inconsistent at best, even over the last month. I don't know. I'll be honest. This feels, a 2-point line feels right. I know everybody's going to be riding Arizona State as they come into this one hot, but it feels like a good spot for, I mentioned Rocco Becht, that Cyclones offense to not do anything consistent necessarily, but they come up with big plays when they need them.
Yeah. Look, I like the over in this game. I think the number is low enough. I mean, 49.5 in the college game, that's not tremendously high. And when you've got, look, the elements are not a factor. All right? It's not like you're playing in Ames at night in the middle of December. No, you're going to be playing in Arlington at AT&T Stadium, and it's going to be as long as the sun isn't a factor, which it has known to be. It shouldn't be a factor at 11 a.m. game. I love the over. I think the over is the absolute play here. 49.5 to 50. You're not asking for a lot of points. You're not asking for both teams to get in the 30s. You're asking for maybe one to get in the 30s for this one. So, I don't have a great feel because Arizona State's new to this. They were not a very good team last year. Now I know the transfer portal, everything changes. Iowa State's been a good program, overall. I like the over.
So what's interesting is I don't necessarily have an argument against the over logic, and I think it makes a ton of sense. If we're taking over here, though, I think I'm leaning Arizona State. Like, I just believe that if there are points to be scored back and forth on a consistent basis, the more consistent offense is going to win, and I think that's the Sun Devils. I think if we're talking about a game that stays under the total and one big play or two can be enough to swing the game, I think I lean Cyclones and Iowa State. But like you, it's tough for me to find a definitive side on this one. It just is. I mean, late in the week, we were talking about 66% of the bets being on Arizona State, but 61% of the money being on Iowa State. Ooh. So a lot of public action on the Sun Devils, which, like I said, makes sense. They're the hot team coming in, but apparently the shark money coming in on the Cyclones, and that's not with a particularly large spread either.
It's not. That's not a big spread at all. It's very, very small. I mean, your margins, how do you take a dog to cover and think that they're not the best team? When it's, you're not going to take a dog at +2 and not think they're going to win the game. You're taking them because you think they're going to win the game. And that's where, honestly, the money line really comes into play there because you don't have to lay any juice. So If you were going to take the +2, you might as well just take the money line.
Yeah, Iowa State +105, so a little bit better than even money on the money line. Arizona State -125. I think if you're going Sun Devils on this one, if you're hell-bent on taking Arizona State, you just pay the juice and take money line at -125 and don't screw around with the spread at all. Either way, the winner of this game most likely plugged in short. Again, we're talking about this before the Boise State UNLV game. You may be listening to it after the Boise State UNLV game. And who knows, maybe something crazy happened there and the Rebels pulled off something insane and they're now pegged to be the 12 seed. But short of a massive upset in the Mountain West game, the winner of Iowa State, Arizona State, going to be the 12 seed when next week's CFP 12-team bracket is revealed. Saturday afternoon in Atlanta, 4 Eastern, number 5 Georgia Bulldogs, number 2 Texas Longhorns. Another tight spread, this one in the SEC title game. A field goal. Can Sark and the Horns exact revenge for their only loss of the season, as ugly as it was, at home to the Georgia Bulldogs? Carson Beck has cleaned up the turnovers the last few weeks, Choppy. No INTs in his last 3 games, but the offense as a whole still sputtering, fits and starts. And Texas was the team that probably made Beck look the worst this year. I guess Alabama had their moments too. Ewers, he was inefficient and immobile against Georgia last time out, but last week, despite the ankle injury, looked pretty good, pretty efficient, pretty mobile. And if his offensive line can actually give him some time in this game, maybe this is the Horns' chance to, like I said, exact some revenge. It's going to be interesting to me, I think, to see how Georgia handles whatever kind of Arch Manning package gets used this week. They've struggled against Jalen Milroe. They struggled a lot last week against Haynes King. Had some issues against Jackson Dart as well. Do we get more than a single Arch Manning series this week because of Ewers being limited with the ankle? And is that the difference?
This one surprised me. Not because I don't think Texas can win this game. They absolutely can. But from a pure betting standpoint, someone's going to have to explain to me how I go on the road and I'm up 23-0 on you, and I win 30-15, and then I play you again like 6 weeks later. I'm now in my second home stadium, and I'm an underdog?
Yeah.
Someone's got to explain this. Like, if I was a Georgia fan or a Georgia bettor, I'm like, how does that happen? Like, we went there and we dominated that football team. We physically emasculated them. And I'm a dog in basically my home. That doesn't pass the smell test.
No, it doesn't. The only thing I can think of there is that's the only time Georgia has looked like Georgia all year, right? Like that's
Right.
the only time all year Georgia has looked like themselves was that game in Austin. And the last couple of, I mean, they're damn near this close to losing to Georgia Tech at home last week. Nothing against the Yellow Jackets. I think they exceeded a ton of expectations this year. And again, Haynes King was a stud last week. So all due credit to Georgia Tech. I think the questions are, is Georgia legit or not? And it's fair to ask that 3-9 against the spread this season. Georgia's, much like most of last season, doing just enough to get by. And maybe if you're looking at it from that perspective, you see a team that does just enough and doesn't get by this time and loses by a field goal. And that's what the number is.
Second half against Alabama, they looked like Georgia.
Okay, fair.
Second half against Tennessee, they looked like Georgia. But you're right. I mean, for the most part, the Texas game was their only complete, and I mean complete game, of the entire year. So that plays into it. I think this is an under type game. I don't think 50 is going to get there.
No, not with these defenses.
If one team gets to 30, it'll be like a 31-17 game.
Yeah, I think this is a race to 24, I think.
Yeah, so I think the under is what I would go with. And if I was going to take the under, I would also take the +3. Okay. I think Texas is good enough. I think Texas is good enough to win. I think Texas is, along with Oregon. You got to say this, and people in the SEC and nationwide have, kind of talked about their schedule and the fact that they didn't play Alabama, they didn't play Ole Miss, they didn't play Tennessee, they didn't play yada yada yada. Well, they're the only one of the bunch, along with Oregon and along with Penn State, that they didn't have a letdown game. There wasn't a game where they didn't show up. There was a game where they didn't show up, but they didn't play great at Arkansas, and they still won. Right? But they didn't play great. They still won the game, and at the end of the day, that matters. So Texas has got that. They didn't beat Georgia, and they got emasculated, but they showed up in every other game they played.
Another game that's interesting in that we've got a flip between the number of tickets and the percentage of money. 55% of the tickets as of Thursday night were on Texas, but 55% of the money on the Bulldogs. So again, consider that. Seemed to be a little bit more of a public favorite on Texas, a little bit more of a sharp favorite on Georgia for what it's worth. We talked about the ACC picture earlier, what it means. SMU has to win to feel totally secure that they're in the playoff, I think. Clemson's rush defense, bottom 20 in the country in explosive rush rate. They've given up big plays on the ground all year. And you got Kevin Jennings, undefeated as a starting quarterback this year, and Brashard Smith, their running back, over 6 yards a carry, and at least a 19 or longer yard run in all but one game this season. SMU's defensive front, too, top 15 of the country in pass rush, according to PFF. I'm always going to question Cade Klubnik. I'm sorry. I know he had his moments where he looked really good this year, especially in the back half of the season. He's still Cade Klubnik for me. And if it's just Klubnik and Moffa or bust, I don't think that's enough for Clemson. 5-7 against the spread this year. And in this one, only getting 2.5. And what you made a great point earlier, Choppy, is effectively a home game for them against one-loss SMU. I think SMU takes care of business against Clemson.
I think they win this game, and I think the over hits too. I think it's a high-scoring game. I think Clemson gets to mid-30s on this one. That's a big number though, right? I mean, we're talking about a number in the high 50s, mid-50s anyway. So I think Clemson is going to be able to score. At the end of the day, Clemson's not Clemson what they've used to be. And there's going to be a talent disparity. Like Clemson has some higher end players still. There are still players they have that are going to go to the NFL. They're going to be able to score enough points on SMU. SMU is just going to be able to keep up. Like their offense is very, very good. I'm vastly against Dabo. I have been. I hate how he is the gatekeeper of college football, trying to keep it the way it used to be. No transfer portal, no NIL. He probably wants to go back to the Bowl Alliance right? He probably wants the ACC to match up with the Big
He just wants to go to the Orange Bowl every year, Choppy. That's it.
That's it. That's all he wants. So he's the gatekeeper. I don't care for that. They're good. They're good-ish. I think SMU's the better football team.
What's interesting is this thing opened up with I think, let's see, it had Clemson as a 1-point favorite, actually, and has come back to the side that I think is a little more realistic, makes a little bit more sense. Like we talked about, SMU, 2.5, down to 1.5 in some spots. So a little bit of a movement there on the line. But again, another game, Choppy, and this is interesting, where you're getting more money on Clemson and more tickets on SMU. So SMU, the public favorite. Clemson may be the sharp favorite. I'm not riding with the Sharps on this one, and I think we're both on SMU here in the ACC championship game. And again, that's real. I understand for Clemson it's do or die. I really feel like SMU understands that it's do or die as well. And I think their offense, Clemson could be had here. I think SMU can score points with a total in the mid-50s. I think I'd take the over as well. I think over in SMU is the play.
I'm with you. I like the over. I like SMU. I think SMU is the better team. I love the quarterback. I love their head coach. I mean, we've had Rhett on our show a number of times. I mean, he will talk the sport with you. He's not just talking about his game.
He's a football guy.
He will give you his opinion on whether college football is on the right path, the wrong path. I think he's a great head coach.
I can't wait to hear him if something happens where SMU loses a tight game and still somehow gets bounced like we were talking about earlier. He is going to have plenty to say if that ends up being the case. All right, we've talked ACC. We've talked SEC. We've talked Big 12. What about the Big Ten title game, and how does that shake out the picture for those top, not just 4 seeds? We know how that's going to go, a conference champion in each spot. But the most interesting thing to me, seeds 5 through 8. How important for Penn State to not get boat raced in the Big Ten championship game? Could it drop them out of having a home game possibly? Is it possible they could just beat Oregon straight up? There's only a 3.5-point spread. We'll get into that game. We'll tell you what we like for national championship odds, because those have been updated as well, plus our best bets before we get out of here. We are live coast to coast every single Friday night and Saturday morning on the BetQL network, always right there inside your Odyssey app. All you got to do is search for BetQLU. Get us in podcast form whenever you want us, wherever you get your podcasts. Always on YouTube as well, on the Odyssey Sports Channel. This is BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
and one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3. Oh!
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game! We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, pick it in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Let's get back to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM.
Live coast to coast on the BetQL Network, Friday nights and Saturday mornings, alongside RJ Choppy. John Martin has stepped out. I am Chris Mack. This is BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. National championship odds have updated, obviously. We'll tell you if we got anything that we like right now, plus our best bets for conference championship week. And the Big X championship game in Indianapolis between Oregon and Penn State in just a moment. But did you see this, Choppy? Did you see who interviewed for that UNC coaching job?
I did.
Bill Belichick.
I did see that.
This guy, I'm convinced he just wants to interview for anything, and he just wants to feel wanted. You know, he just wants people to be like, Bill, we like you. Can we talk to you about some things? And then they'll talk to him, and then he'll mumble something under his breath, go cut the sleeves off his hoodie, and that'll be that. Nobody will actually hire him. I cannot imagine in a million years. I know there's this new model, like with Andrew Luck at Stanford, where you've got like a GM who handles recruiting and NIL and all those pieces. That maybe there's a world where Bill Belichick could coach college kids. I can't see it happening.
Oh no, this is either a favor to somebody, or this is honestly knowing Bill, and I don't know Bill, but just knowing what I know of Bill. This is just practice. This is a practice interview.
Yeah.
All right. He's not aware of ChatGPT. He doesn't know about AI. He's like, he went into the Atlanta interview last year. He was probably not very good. Because let's be fair, the guy hadn't interviewed for a job since Bill Clinton was in office.
Right.
So he was out of practice. I fully believe that this was a practice job interview. Now, I do think North Carolina can win. Look, we have seen Auburn and Alabama, and we have seen plenty of schools out there, Michigan and Tennessee and Texas, have good football and basketball programs at the same time. Florida, We've seen it. There's no reason North Carolina can't be. None.
No, they can. They can. They just have to commit to it. That's all they have to do is just commit to it. And maybe it takes a big name as a head coach. It's not going to be Belichick, but maybe there's another big name out there by the time the hiring cycle really opens all the way up that they end up finding that makes more sense.
Jamie Chadwell. That's the
name? That's the guy?
That's the guy.
Okay.
He's right up the road, right? He was at Coastal, and now he's at Liberty. He knows the recruiting landscape, knows the high school coaches in North Carolina. That's the guy. That's
not a terrible idea, I don't think. I don't know if it's quite the marquee, name and lights that they need to go after, but a guy who, like you said, knows the area well and has produced results in a couple different spots.
And he brings Caden Salter with him. So who entered the portal?
That's a good point too. That's it. That's so much of this now. It's just what players you bringing with you too. It's like Signetti going to Indiana and bringing half the JMU roster with them. We'll keep an eye on that certainly, and all the other vacancies that open up in the coming weeks. Big Ten championship game. Penn State, Oregon in Indy. It's a 3.5 point spread, depending on where you find it, in favor of Oregon. Can Dylan Gabriel's quick passing attack neutralize that Penn State pass rush in the Big Ten championship game? Drew Aller is one of the few quarterbacks in the country who's been nearly as efficient as Gabriel. Gabriel, I think, 73% completion percentage this year. Aller, 72%. If the Nittany Lions can produce on early downs offensively, the way they have to this point this year, 11th in the country EPA per play on first and second down. They've got a chance, I think, to keep this thing close with Oregon. I think if Penn State gets a lead in this thing in the second half, they're really going to have an opportunity to pull off the upset. They'll pin their ears back. Abdul Carter will be getting in there on Gabriel. But the worry, if you're a Penn State fan or a Penn State bettor, is that Oregon gets a lead early and Oregon is able to dictate terms, dictate pace, come at your defense, keep them on their heels, and put you in a tough spot.
Yeah, I think, I hate to do this to you, but
No, you don't.
If this game was played on grass and they let that for about 4 months and it was weeds, then Penn State's got a really good opportunity to win.
If it was a vacant lot somewhere in Indianapolis.
This is on turf, man. This is a tough spot. It's not their game. It's not their game. They're not built for this. They're a grass field, let's play tough football type team.
Yeah.
And I look, I will pick against James Franklin any chance I get in a big spot. Just the way
hard
it
to
is.
argue against.
I think Penn State's a really talented team, and it just depends on who their matchup is, but I could easily see them making the Final Four. I think that's probably where they end as at the Final Four.
Well, exactly. If it shakes out the way the prospective matchups are now, like let's say they lose a tight game to Oregon and end up as the 5 seed, right? And they get a draw against the Big 12 champ, for instance.
They'll win.
They'll win at home, and then depending on who they get in the second round, there's a chance they also win that one. Maybe they get Boise State, right? If you're the 5 seed, there's a chance you get Arizona State, Boise State in a 12, and then the 4. Yeah, I could see Penn State in the semifinals going up against Oregon or Ohio State or Tennessee. And I think you make a good point. The one counter I would have is that when they played USC at the Coliseum, which I get it is not on turf, but they showed so much variance in what they're able to do offensively, particularly early and then again late in that game with all the stuff they did with Tyler Warren. I think they can get creative enough on offense to keep pace with Oregon. But like you said, it's just not likely. It's possible. It's not likely. So
it's I think it's likely that this is an under bet too.
Yeah, 49.5. Yeah, I do worry that Oregon could open things up, and if they do,
right.
If we get a little back and forth here, Penn State maybe rips a couple big plays off. This could go over. I wouldn't touch the total. If Penn State got out past 3.5, I'd think about it, but this is probably a no bet for me. We'll see. I'm more curious, like I said, to see how what the impact is on Penn State, on the loser of the SEC game, on where they fall 5 through 8. That'll be something we can talk more about next week.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's much movement. They've talked about that. Ward Manuel talked about that on Tuesday, where he was like, TCU lost a couple of years ago. They didn't move. Maybe they moved like one spot. But, I mean, I think that Penn State's going to get a home game. Now, whether they're the 8th seed and they flip with Ohio State because Ohio State beat them head-to-head, and they drop down to the 8 and they host Tennessee, and Ohio State moves up and Ohio State hosts, whoever.
Right.
That may be, right? And it depends, because Georgia and Texas are either going to flip or Georgia may drop down one. I don't know how that's going to work.
See, the way I could see things is, in the outlier opportunity that Penn State upsets Oregon, right? I think Penn State only moves up to 2, and if Texas beats Georgia, they're 1. You got Texas 1, Penn State 2. Penn State losing, though, if you drop them below Ohio State, I understand the logic. They lost to Ohio State. They're both 2-loss teams. What are we doing? But Penn State's second loss coming in the conference championship game, I don't think the committee's going to do that, to be honest. I think it's pretty simple and pretty clear to me that the losers of the Big Ten and the SEC championship games are probably going to be 5-6. I think the winners are 1-2 in some order, and the losers are 5-6. I don't see. I don't know. I have a hard time.
I think Notre Dame's locked in there. I think Notre Dame's locked in at 5.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's where they're going to wind up being. I think Penn State, if they lose, they stay at 6. Georgia, they lose, they probably stay at 7. I hope they stay at 7. I don't want any part of Georgia. I'd much rather go to Ohio State than Georgia again. For Tennessee. I'd much rather that. I know how that book ends. Give me a chance to somebody else.
Yeah, I don't. I would, if I'm a Tennessee fan, I'm much more interested in a visit to Columbus. The weather be damned. Absolutely. I'll go to Ohio State and I'll just lean on the run game, and I'll lean on my defense and force Will Howard into some inopportune mistakes.
It's 20 degrees in Knoxville. They'll be fine, right? It's cold.
Exactly. They've dealt with it before. All right, before we get out of here, some best bets for conference championship weekend. John not here right now. We can't come up with the collab like you boys did last week, Choppy, but what do you got?
I don't want to do this to you, but I'm going to. I'm going to take Oregon and the 3.5, depending on where you can find it. I just think they're too talented. They're too good of a football team. Penn State has had 2 pretty close games. Now, Oregon had them too, but that was at the very, very beginning of the year. But the Penn State game against Minnesota and then USC, so those pretty close games against teams that they should have handled. Granted, they were on the road, no doubt about that one. And Penn State should have probably 60% of the crowd in this game, being that it's relatively close. But yeah, I still think Oregon is the better football team all around.
One thing to keep an eye out for, Boobie Wallace, Harrison Wallace III, will be back for Penn State in this game. So another receiving option on the outside. We've seen the Penn State offense struggle to get those wide receivers involved, though. We'll see, especially against quality secondaries. If Oregon secondary can keep them in check, then definitely I probably would go in your direction as well, Choppy. The one out of the conference championship games that I like more than any other, actually, I'm going to put that on pause real quick. If you're listening to this or watching it on Friday night before kickoff of UNLV Boise, come with me and sprinkle just a little bit on the Rebs. Come with me. 4.5. I'll sprinkle just a little bit on UNLV. Maybe even some on the money line, Choppy. I think there's a chance UNLV gets some revenge against Boise State in the Mountain West Championship game. And who doesn't enjoy chaos? But my best bet for this weekend going to be the ACC Championship game and number 8 SMU. If they're laying a field goal or less against Clemson, I'm all over SMU in this one. I think Clemson is reeling. I went against them last week, took South Carolina, paid off for me. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to bet against Dabo. I'm going to bet against Klubnik. I'm going to bet against Maffa. I'm going to bet on SMU's defense to force them into some mistakes, win the ACC championship game, and secure their playoff spot, and hopefully keep us from having to argue about whether Bama really deserves a spot or not. It seems that's done with. If Bama gets in over an SMU team that somehow loses to Clemson, we will have much larger arguments to have next week. And it could get ugly. For RJ Choppy, for John Martin, for our producer, Zach Kroll, I'm Chris Mack. Thank you for joining us. Next week, we break down the bracket right here on BetQLU, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas.
You've been listening to BetQLU, presented by BetMGM. If you missed any of the show, listen back anytime on the new and improved Odyssey app.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Go for the betting cycle on BetQL with Cody Decker.
Cody Decker, former professional baseball player, turned professional smartass on the radio.
Sports handicapper Rob Brown.
When Penix Jr. plays USC, he's getting 400 yards.
Cycling all the top plays.
And Cody Decker, I think Florida can cover today.
And one outrageous show parlay.
1, 2, 3.
Let the chaos begin. It's Bet for the Cycle on the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP. Really makes me angry that, like, Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for... I get it. Now it's, okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game. We've seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. And it ends with absolute disaster. But I'll tell you, that's fun. But the most fun thing about betting on sports for me is this. Like, hey, there's no tomorrow. And now, come on, pick it in.
Are you ready, sir? Start your engines. Let's go.
Astros money line versus the Marlins. Johnny Cueto, no thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. How does this affect me personally?
Which is absolutely bonkers to me.
If you do the middle school math, is 117 yards per game that you gotta post each and every weekend.
I knew it.
Who has the upper hand? Do we think it's going to be the offenses, or do we think it's going to be the defenses?
How about Saturday's game? Let's just throw a random game out here.
Like, I don't want to put faith in NC State. There's a chance we'll lose outright. Who knows? Jinx is definitely not paying attention right now. He's just vibing to the music.
Are you ready for the most interactive sports gambling show? Introducing BetQL's Send It In with PJ Glasser. We want to hear from you. Send It In is about your picks, your trends, and your fades. Share your thoughts, predictions, and your best daily best bets with the Send It In community. Set your reminders, mark your calendars, and get ready to send it in on weekday afternoons at 1 Eastern on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. On your home for wagertainment, the BetQL Network, presented by BetMGM.
Some would say that maybe he'll be chasing Super Bowl MVP really makes me angry that like Knicks fans can't have anything. We've been bad for I get it. Now it's okay, 100% of attention on 9 million games tonight. It's a playoff game.